Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me here today on the 10th of February. Oh, actually, today's my mum's birthday. Happy birthday, Mum. I'll send you a text message after I finish streaming. Anyway, how are you going? I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm presenting at Ticca conference in Melbourne on the 28th and 1st of March. And I'm giving a talk on Tales of Fail, how I lost my quality coach role. And I'm just pausing that for now. And so I'm going to use this opportunity to practice the story that I'm going to go through. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have to prepare a tech talk, I find starting with the story you want to tell rather than going straight into slides is a really good first step. I think if you start with slides, it's it's definitely a recipe for doing too much work. And if you have a good idea of the story you want to tell, the information you want your audience to gain from hearing you speak, then you're in a better position rather than just rambling and waffling on and not really having a sense of direction. So I'm using this opportunity to practice a talk. And I'm just going to go through my story. I'm going to brainstorm a couple of bits. I've got a rough idea of the path I want to take, but we'll see how this goes. If you've got any questions, just pop them up in the chat and we'll go from there. So I got a quality coach role at Campaign Monitor at the start of last year. However, I didn't pass probation and I was shown the door after about 5 months. And so this presentation is a talk on hiring for quality coaches, what attributes to look for, how to do well in the interview, and also how to manage your own mental health as well. So I think this story starts. If I do that, no, I don't think I really want to do that in presentation mode. No, I'm just going to walk through each slide. So I believe this story starts when I was working at Tyro. I was hired as a test engineer. It was a pretty awesome team. I was doing embedded mobile testing with a team. I was working for Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie Charette she's got a really great reputation in the testing community, and it was awesome to work for her, and it was a great time. I'd had ups and downs with my depression at Tyro, and that was nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't really all that comfortable with my skills as a tester either. I didn't really feel like I was applying my craft, or I understood what's involved with testing. I didn't realize I was I didn't realize how to talk about testing in a skilled way. I didn't have the confidence in my skills. No, what else? I just felt like testing was just something I did. I've learned how to talk about it a bit more now. But yeah, that was, I didn't have any self-confidence coming into that role. Had a sense of imposter syndrome. I didn't feel like I was good enough to work there. A whole bunch of stuff. If you've ever experienced anything similar, you can let me know. But yeah, so I got integrated into a dev team. I started enjoying the work I was doing. I was the first tester, or maybe the second tester embedded in a dev team. So dev teams hadn't really worked closely with testers before. And I kind of use the term free range testing. I was kind of dumped into a dev team and was like, hey, figure out how to do testing this way now. That was a little stressful, especially when I didn't have the confidence in my skills to talk about what I was doing. But it was a learning experience. Where did I want to go from there? So yeah, I guess just speaking out loud and brainstorming the story you want to tell. I should probably be taking some notes as I talk through this, but I guess I'm recording it, so it's fine. After about a year in, I had received a positive peer review. I actually broke down into tears at that point because I felt like I wasn't doing a good job, but it was just such a relief to hear that I was doing a good job. And then I had some personal life issues happen, which impacted my mental ability to contribute to work effectively. It wasn't exactly a happy time of life. And but I was pretty comfortable with the culture at Tyro. I was. It's been one of the best companies I've worked for. And I remember thinking that, there'd only be one or two companies that if they knocked on my door, uh, I would leave Tyro for. Lo and behold, I was headhunted by someone who had a contract position at one of these companies. I can't tell you what the company name is because I was a contractor there. And under my contract, I can't give the details of my client. But it was a fairly big IT company that specializes in advertising and searching. And I was working on a mapping and navigation Android app. So that's the next slide there. So it was mostly in the public transport area. So if you're doing a query to try and find when the next bus was and if the timetable was a bit wrong, I would triage the feedback that came back from that. This was to prevent bugs getting to software engineers. They're an expensive resource, and triaging is one of those things that if you've got a fairly well refined product, engineers can't really add that much value if it's more of a business process. One of the issues with this mapping app was that it was public transport companies all over the world would own their own data and upload it into this app. But the general public would perceive if there were data quality issues, they would think that the company was responsible rather than the app was responsible rather than the public transport company. So, this was like supposed to be the most exciting opportunity in my career. I thought I had made it. I thought this is what everyone strives to achieve these days, is to work for one of these big giant companies, and their offices were really cool and the people were fun, but I don't know. It's just, I think if you were there as a full-time employee, I think they put a lot of effort in making their employees happy. But considering I was there as a contractor, there's at the end of the day, it is just another company. And sometimes, the reason why these companies want to outsource and contract this work is because it can get a bit boring and a bit tedious, a bit repetitive, and it's something you don't really want to give your full-time employees to do. Because triaging bugs every day, all day, every day, can get a bit tedious and repetitive. So this company was not the only company to outsource elements of testing. I did have an interview with Apple once where it was, get this, it was localization testing for Australian English. Now that is super niche. But it was, again, an outsourced model. A lot of these companies do see the value in having skilled testers do particular business tasks, but they don't hire full-time testers. And that's a bit of a trend in the Silicon Valley area, is you don't really seem to hire manual testers. You might hire technical testers or maybe performance gurus or security experts or people who have a bit more of a niche other than I don't like using this term, manual testing. I prefer to call myself an exploratory tester. I will avoid using the term manual testing in all of my profile, simply because of the bad rep that, it's considered unskilled. I think that's just wrong, but I can't change all the companies and their perceptions about testing out there overnight. So I can do what I can do, and it's hard to change people's mindsets. So yeah, a lot of these companies outsource their testing. They don't. I mean, like, a lot of this work, like if you were doing localization testing for a language for an Apple product, you're probably doing a lot of the same work day in, day out. I guess there are opportunities to bring in tech skills and to improve the product or the process somehow, but these are just ginormous products, and there's lots of smart people who work on these products too. So there's a fair chance that there's someone you're working with who's also got the same ideas on how to improve the process. I was given one task at Maps, at this mapping Android app, which was to try and improve the feedback cycle, because I was mostly dealing with user feedback. How can we make that more efficient? And there was an internal seminar where a whole bunch of people got involved and brainstormed a bunch of ideas. There was 3 or 4 of us who actually already had very similar ideas on how to improve the capturing the user feedback right at the initial start. And so I'm like, well, there's other people who are helping build these awesome products, and I didn't feel like there was that much more I could contribute to that project. After about 9 months of working on this Android app, I started to get down on myself. I was getting into a relapse of depression. Being a contractor in this position, I felt like I was I felt like I couldn't talk to my team about it either. The way the contract was set up was the company I was working for was called EPAM. And EPAM only has about 14 or 15, maybe 20 people now in Australia. They're a really large global company with 25,000 employees all around the world. But here in Australia, it's pretty tiny. So there's about 15 employees-ish, give or take, and they're all working for this one client. But most of them are all working on other parts of different elements of products. And I was the only one on the Android map project. So I had no one really on the EPAM side that I could talk to about not feeling satisfied or fulfilled with work. And I felt like it was potentially in breach of my contract if I was talking about this stuff with my managers on the client side. So I felt like I was between a rock and a hard place. I didn't know what to do or who to talk to, and it got more mundane and harder to do the task that had been assigned to me. It was meant to be a 12-month rolling contract, and after about 9 months, I just went, no, I just can't. I don't want to extend this contract. I got to find something else to do. And I was looking around at the career progression at this point. And I felt like as a tester, there was only really 2 directions I could go towards. I could either get into automation testing, which is not my cup of tea. I can code, but I prefer to build products that customers use rather than just build tools that software engineers use to help improve quality. That's just me. So I wasn't really looking to to get really hands deep into knee deeps into automation testing. And I felt like the only other thing I could do as a tester is move towards like a test lead or test management position. But I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for people. People are hard. So at this time, I was really contemplating if I even wanted to continue doing testing. Sorry, please ignore my mail pop-ups. Where was I? Okay, so I was really contemplating doing a little bit of a career change. I still enjoy technology. I was contemplating if I should move into Android dev because I'd been working on an Android project and an iOS project before that one while I was at Tyro. So mobile testing is my specialty. So I felt like, well, I could skill up into mobile dev. That sounds pretty cool. Or I could move towards product management where you're not really managing people as much, but you're trying to get a high quality product out the door. I'm like, I know it's hard to crack into the product management space. Some people have told me of some of the interviews out there, and I see some of the product managers I work with. They work really hard. I'm like, that sounds. I don't know if I'm up for that. They just seem to be really dedicated to everything and really switched on, and I'm like, it seems like too much work. But I had heard some people talk about quality coaching as a role. Like, that sounds interesting. Where the focus is potentially on trying to encourage that quality as a team responsibility, and with elements of teaching and coaching. I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. I'm going to try and look for a quality coach role. And so Campaign Monitor had a job ad. I think I still have their job ad link somewhere. I can share it a bit later. But it got me really excited. I remember writing a blog at some point around the time going, oh, look at this new job. It looks so exciting. It looks so cool. And then I broke my ankle. I fell off a wall, indoor rock climbing, and I was in hospital for a week. I shattered my ankle into 4 tiny bits. The week I was meant to have my interview at Campaign Monitor, I was in hospital. I couldn't get out. And this was not the only interview I was doing at the time. I'd had about like 12 or 13 interviews at this point. I had the luxury of taking my time with finding a good job because I wasn't really in a rush. But this put a bit of a slowdown on the job hunting efforts. There was one interview that I was unable to reschedule. I ended up having it in hospital. I was sitting in bed. I even had a suit jacket that I put over my hospital gown. I had all the hospital equipment behind me. I was in a 4-person dorm. So the lady who had the bed opposite me, she heard the whole interview. And it's just a crazy thing to do. I don't recommend trying to break your leg. Yeah. So I had 2 surgeries, spent a week in hospital. I couldn't walk for 12 weeks. So this is me on a knee scooter at my uncle's place trying to get around. In a cast. One thing I'm really grateful for is public transport in Sydney is mostly accessible, at least where I was living. I was living in Ashfield, and I could get to the train station, and it wasn't too bad. Actually getting around on the knee scooter, you got used to it. But yeah, I went into my interview on a knee scooter at Campaign Monitor. I can talk you through the interview process. If you're looking to maybe transition into a quality coach role, or you're looking to hire one, the way I had a 2-hour interview at Campaign Monitor. I think there was a general bit of tell us about yourself. What have you done so far? What's your attitudes towards quality? It was a 2-hour interview. It was with one part of the team for 1 hour and then another part of the team for the second hour. So it was some of the engineering leads, some of the managers, some of the team as well. I remember one question I had to pair with a developer, and it was, talk us through. I was helping coach the developer with testing. So I was going through a scenario. I was letting them drive the keyboard and the mouse, and basically was guiding them through discovering some features in an app. So that was interesting. One way to ask, or if you're interviewing someone for a quality coach role, one thing you can do is actually get them to coach someone. You sit them down with a developer for 10 minutes and go, hey, how would you go about coaching them with this new feature on product here? I think also having a chat about how you would run a bug bash or encourage the team to own their quality. I think one of the interview questions I had was, what are some of the shortfalls of having a quality coach encourage the team to be better testers, as opposed to letting the tester do all the testing? And if someone can clearly articulate the difference, then that's a good sign. While I was at Tyro, I also interviewed a few other testers as well. So I've got some ideas on how to recruit testers of different caliber. Actually, there's someone who's got a mind map, testing interview mind map. Let's see if I can find. This one. By Dan Ashby. How I interview testers. So I think this could be a good reference. So we went through an intro, went through a little bit of testing knowledge. We didn't really go through misconceptions, but we did do a pairing exercise. And I find this structure is actually how a lot of my interviews lately have gone along those lines too. If you've got the opportunity and you're in an interview and there's a whiteboard, you should try and use it. You should challenge yourself the next time you're in that interview situation to go, hey, can I draw something for you? I think it really impresses the pants off anyone. If you're able to go, hey, can I draw something, and you whiteboard out a problem, it shows that you're proactive, that you have decent communication skills, and that you've got the critical thinking needed to work through a problem. When I'm interviewing other testers, there's 5 things I'm usually looking out for. I'll call it like maybe the 5 C's of testing. I tend to focus on trying to assess someone's critical thinking. I don't think it matters too much what type of technical experience people have. If they're willing to learn and they're decent thinkers and they can clearly articulate what they're thinking, they're going to pick up any tools or situation that you pop them into. So I think if you get asked a critical thinking type of question, and if you don't have a whiteboard nearby, maybe take in some pen and paper and go, hey, can I mind map a solution for you? Or as I walk through it, do you mind? Or you can get out a pen and paper and start drawing, and using your drawings to talk about your thinking approach. you can't really ask someone directly, hey, what's your communication skills like? But you get a sense of communication when you're talking through when someone's showing you a demo of their critical thinking. If they're able to clearly articulate their problem solving skills while they're really nervous because interviews are hard, then they generally have good communication skills. I think a common question that people ask in testing interviews to gauge the communication skills is, what is it? Someone returns a bug report to you as will not fix or not a bug. How do you react to that situation? And I think that's a poor hypothetical situation because my ideal bug report is one that never gets written. I would like to, if I'm working in a collaborative environment, I'm more likely to tap a developer sitting next to me on the shoulder and go, hey, I'm doing this thing with this feature and I'm seeing some weird behavior. Am I doing this right or is this a bug? So I'll tend to get the confirmation that it's a bug before it's even written. And if it's part of the work we're doing in this iteration, then the developer's like, oh, yeah, I'll fix that. And it'll generally be fixed as part of the next code commit. And maybe we do some pair testing to make sure it no longer exists as a bug. But yeah, that's my ideal bug, one that never gets written. Yeah, so that situation of what would you do in this situation if someone's like closed your bugs? I'm like, well, I shouldn't have gotten into that situation in the first place. But I would then, if the dev was like, oh yes, that's a feature with team X, that's a bug with team X, maybe we investigate it further. We'll go over to the team and go, hey, we're observing this behavior. We've added it to your backlog, and so if someone's closing my bugs, it's probably because they've become old and stale, and doing a bug backlog cleanup is perfectly fine. I feel like if you put bugs on your backlog and you never visit them, bugs go to die when you add them to the backlog. If they don't get fixed within the next couple of iterations, then what was the point in raising them anyway? I think having information just float around for historical purposes is not useful. Yeah. I might try and look for, I think creativity comes under critical thinking as well. Sometimes I think a pretty common interview question is you get handed some sort of regular item like a pen or a handbag, and you're like, oh, our company is now going to be manufacturing these things. How would you test this thing? And the way I'd go about that type of question is, you can brainstorm all the things you know about quality from testing and try to apply those to quality for the product. So for example, you might have some skill. You might know about security testing. What does security look like for a handbag? What does performance or durability or other elements of ILID qualities, availability, affordability, all of these other elements of quality, how can you apply them to testing a handbag or a pen or a bottle of water? I find people tend to struggle with this type of question, especially if they're nervous, because they're not able to go through their normal thinking process because they're being put on the spot. It's almost like a deer in the headlights, like, oh, what do I do? I got no idea. If you find yourself in that situation, I think drawing a little mind map of different elements of quality or trying to focus that can really help. There might be like a coding style question where you try to assess someone's technical ability. Not from really a pure automation point of view, but I feel like people working in testing and tech should consider themselves technical people. You don't need to be a developer, but having some basic understanding or being able to read code, or I went through a TDD exercise when I was interviewing for the map app, Android map app. And it was just like, well, talk us through your, if we were building a new feature, how would you apply TDD, test-driven development, to that practice? And it's just pseudocode, but being able to apply that, I think just shows that you have some technical credibility. One of the things that got me at Campaign Monitor was because I'd broken my ankle. I had broken leg blues. I had fallen into a relapse of depression, being in pain, not being able to walk, not sleeping as well. I was pretty miserable. I tried to not. I think in my first 3 or 4 months at Campaign Monitor, I think I had about a month off because I'd had there was just days where I just couldn't come into the office because I was just feeling too low, and I had to have surgery again at 12 weeks to remove a bolt that went all through my ankle, and I didn't realize how much that was going to hurt. Like starting to walk again was, holy cow, so painful. And just being in pain, and it just really takes it out of you. It takes mental energy out, and you just can't focus on doing a good job. And I felt like I shouldn't have pushed myself as much, but I didn't really have the financial security to be able to take luxury with my recovery. So I reckon there were points where I pushed myself a bit too hard, and I wasn't able to add value to my team, and yeah. So I feel like my mental health kind of contributed to not passing probation at Campaign Monitor, but I think it was also an experimental role for Campaign Monitor. I think they've realized now that they'd like someone to really help drive the automation testing with their developers, and that's fair enough. Sometimes you experiment with these roles, and if that's what your developers feel like they really need to improve their quality, then there are people. I mean, that wasn't my specialty. I couldn't sit down in the corner and help drive the automation testing when I was distracted or fascinated by other elements of quality, like accessibility. That's really important. And I would just find myself getting more distracted by other parts of quality, rather than code quality. And I've come to realize that's the way I work. And I now have more conviction when I go into interviews and they start talking about automation. I'm like, you know what? If you really want someone to help drive the automation in your teams, I am not the person for you. And it is great to have that sense of clarity into what skills I have and what values I can bring to a company. And so there's actually been a couple of interviews that I've turned out because I now have that sense of clarity with what I want and what I think I can add to a company. Just excuse me while I have a drink. So I the summary of the story was I lost a quality coach job because I wasn't able to bring the right values that the company needed at that time in point. And also struggling with some mental health problems meant I wasn't able to give my best. I didn't actually start that job on the best foot, pun intended. I didn't start it on the right foot. I literally couldn't. Just to put a broken leg pun in there. But if you are interviewing for a quality coach role yourself, or you're thinking of hiring a quality coach, there's a bunch of tips I think you can use for that. That was me going through just talking through the story I want to tell at the conference in 1st of March, and I think that's not too bad. I need a bit of refinement for it. I'm sorry I didn't really do that much exploratory testing today. I actually just did exploratory presenting, a bit of ad hoc presenting. So, and this is fine if you've also if you've got a conference talk coming up as well and you want to practice going through it. I'm happy to help you. This is one way that I'm helping myself practice my public speaking skills. I don't think I had anything else that I wanted to say about that story just yet. Thanks for listening, and I might post up a follow-up blog post with my 5 C's of testing and how to improve elements of that. I hope you enjoyed listening, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.